I wish we had more conversations about what would happen when my mum passed away. You don't learn it at school of like, oh, this is what happens when
Mm.
someone dies.
Mm.
I think people tiptoe around these conversations that, you don't want to admit to the fact that your parent's going to die, and also, yourself, you someday you're going to pass away.
Mm. Hello and welcome to The Silent Epidemic. Today we have a different style of show. I'm pleased to have with me a previous guest that we had on the first season of The Silent Epidemic. Lee Cocker is here with us today.
I
Thank you,
am
Lee, for coming in.
nice to be the second guest, I guess.
Yes, to be asked back again. But Lee has kindly volunteered to come in today and talk about his recent experience with bereavement. So, Lee, obviously, this is a difficult subject for you to talk about.
Yeah.
Can you just share with the viewers why you wanted to come on and talk about this today?
My mum passed away last November. It was unexpected. She had beaten bowel cancer. She was 69. She was 5 days away from her 70th birthday. She'd had the week before, she had like a chest infection. She thought it was COVID. We did a COVID test. She didn't have COVID. She phoned her doctor, got antibiotics sent to the house. She didn't want to go to the doctors because obviously she thought she had COVID and she didn't want to go to the doctors. They sent her antibiotics. She just thought it was a chest infection. This was Thursday, Friday. I stayed at home and worked from home to keep an eye on her. She lived with me. Come Saturday, Sunday. Saturday, she watched TV with us. We watched a film. My son was with us. Come Sunday, Saturday, she'd been sleeping like on the sofa and stuff, and just saying that she still had this chest infection. Come the Sunday, my son had left. He stayed over. I watched TV and was watching TV and checked on mum and briefly spoke to her, like the shopping had been delivered. And I said, oh, the shopping's been delivered, I'm sorting it out. And she was like, oh, yeah. Kind of groggy, but I was like, oh, she'll sleep it off, because I kind of wanted her to get better because her 70th birthday was coming up, and wanted to be able to take her out for a meal. So I briefly spoke to her, went downstairs, sorted out the shopping, had something to eat, watched a movie, kind of fell asleep, and then I woke up and I was like, oh, I haven't heard mum. Went upstairs, went into the room. I shouted at her, and she was not responding. Went to her, she was still warm. I was like, and as I kind of turned her over, I realised she wasn't breathing. Absolutely panicked. Phoned an ambulance straight away. Lucky enough, we had a landline in the bedroom. Phoned the ambulance, and they were like, "Oh, can you get her on the floor?" And I couldn't get her on the floor. And then the ambulance, lucky enough, within 2 or 3, 4 minutes tops, I think, there was an ambulance person that was around the corner that happened to have heard the radio or something.
Wow.
And turned up, and then literally had about 9 people come into the house, which was,
Wow.
and you're panicking. You don't know what to do, and you feel guilty. And then they worked on her, and they said that there was a brief pulse or whatever. My phone, like both my sisters, I have 2 younger sisters, and I kind of let them do what they had to do, and it's a very distressing thing to look at. They worked on her for a couple of hours. I was in the living room. My sisters had turned up at the time, and then they came down, and they said, "Oh, she's gone." They think that the pulse and what they detected was the adrenaline that they'd injected in her to try and get the heart going. The hospital, 2 of the ambulance guys stayed for about another hour or so, and we had to wait for the police to turn up, because obviously it's a death at home and it's unexpected. she hadn't seen a doctor in 4 days. There's certain rules, again,
Yeah.
there's certain things that you don't know or what the procedure is
Mm.
in these type of events. And the distressing thing was Mum was upstairs in her bedroom and we had to wait 7 hours for the police to turn up because something had happened in the area, that a lot of the police had been injured or something had happened, and they were waiting for the police to come on shift. And obviously that was like early hours of the morning, so it was very early hours of the morning, and waiting on the police, and that was incredibly frustrating. And not that I was going to sleep anyway, you wouldn't after something like that. And both my sisters were there, and then other family members turned up, but to have not that you not that I wanted Mum like out of the house straight away, but there's a level of having a dead body, dare I even say a dead body, in the house waiting for the police. And we were going to make an official complaint that we had to wait that long on these.
But I dare say, just the process, and you've quite rightly pointed out, obviously there's laws and, they're in place for a reason. They protect people, right?
Yeah.
But in that moment, you've just experienced this shock because obviously, the day before she's sitting up, she's watching TV with you, she's unwell, she's got a chest infection. You're then putting away shopping the following day thinking she's just sleeping it off, hoping that she's just going to sort of get well so that you can then take her out for her birthday meal. And then all of a sudden you've got all these ambulance people in the house.
Strangers in your house that,
You've got all of that going on, and you get the news that nobody wants to hear.
Yeah.
And then you're told, well, hold on a minute, the police have got to come. Well, okay, the police are going to come. Sounds quite invasive during a very personal moment.
Yeah. I was obviously, I think someone had been through it before, and not. I've experienced it before, that my aunt passed away and I was in the house, and I'd been through the process of the police turning up because it was an unexpected death in the house. And it turned out my aunt had pneumonia, and it was an enlarged heart, and she had other undiagnosed health issues and everything. So I kind of knew that the police were coming because I'd been through that part before. But I think if I hadn't have been through that, I wouldn't have known that process. So the police then turned up, and then the coroner turned up, and then it's then, it's hard to even talk about, but moving the body out of the house. But it was that waiting the 7 hours, that was incredibly frustrating. And we were going to make a complaint, but other things happened that he's like, that's not important. It was more of the fact of, you don't want people to go through the same thing, that someone's passed away in the house. And this is nothing against Essex Police or anything like that. The guy that turned up was very, very helpful, and the coroner that turned up was very, very helpful. And we ended up going. The person that collected Mum's body was another undertaker. Again, it's things you don't know. Was an undertaker that's hired by the council to help in these moments like this, and we ended up going with them because they were so good and everything like that. So we ended up going with them as the undertaker in the end for that. So and then obviously you then get the call that we don't know what happened with Mum, and the reports and everything, and they're like, oh, we have to do an autopsy. And again, it's another thing that you have to deal with, of like, they're gonna do an autopsy on your mum.
And again, it sounds really invasive.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because obviously, you don't. It sounds weird. It's still them, if that makes sense. And like you said, it feels very invasive. But obviously, it's the law. If unexpected death at home, she hadn't seen the doctor in 4 days. She was on antibiotics. They needed to find out what was going on. So she had the autopsy. And obviously there's an element of stress and not knowing and coming up with, oh, what happened? And there's an element of guilt that, oh, I should have checked on her more often during that day, of like, but it was more of, like you said, and I'm glad you said it, sleeping it off, because I wanted her to get better for her 70th birthday.
If you don't mind, you've mentioned guilt quite a few times there. And I dare say that must be quite difficult to navigate, because it's plain to see from how you speak that your mum was a massive part of your life and you really loved and cared for her. But the guilt aspect of it, is it almost trying to...
With the guilt aspect, it's more of like could have, would have, should have. Could I have done this? Could I have done that? But when we got the autopsy report, it was that she'd had a blockage of her heart. It wasn't a heart attack, but it was an artery that led into her heart. It was undetected. She wouldn't have known. She would have passed away in her sleep. It was just the lack of oxygen to her heart.
Has knowing that helped appease that guilt, in terms of actually it was a health condition that she wouldn't have even noticed, no one could have known, and it just happened? And
no, and I think with the chest infection, I think the chest infection was the fact of that we thought it was a chest infection, but it could have been the issue with the artery and the heart and the breathing because of that. And, you know, the guilt of could have, would have, should have, could have taken her to the doctor, could have she gone to the hospital. She didn't want to die in hospital. She didn't like going to see the doctor. She passed away at home. So, you know, the could have, would have, should have, you know, the guilt of like, oh, should I have checked on her? Should I have forced her to go to the doctors? If I'd forced her to go to the doctors and he had told her to go to the hospital, she would have died in hospital. She could have died in hospital because they would have had to do some kind of invasive surgery to clean out the thing. And because of her age and her size, I think she might not have made it through.
But also, it sounds like she was of sound mind, right? So she knew exactly what she wanted. She knew exactly what she needed as such. And it's not like you made those decisions for her. It sounds like she made those decisions very much for herself.
And I don't know if you've experienced it, but there's an element, and I've said this to a lot of people, and there's an element of where the child becomes the parent and the parent becomes the child. And it's that adjustment as well. And obviously, you know, I don't want to force my mum, like, mum, you've got to go to the doctor, mum, you've got to go to hospital. I'm not saying that, you know, I could have done that and stuff like that, but she was her own person and she was an adult. She'd spoken to the doctor. She was on, you know, she was managing her own health. She wasn't relying on me. Do I feel like I could have done more? Yeah, sure. But I think whatever happened was going to happen anyway. And there is an element of that, of, you know, things happen for a reason, you know, if you believe in that or you don't believe in that. But I think if she'd gone to the doctors, if he told her to go to hospital, she wouldn't have been happy. It would have made her mental health a lot worse. She would have she didn't want to die in hospital, even when she had cancer. She had bowel cancer and they did the operation. She was worried she was going to die during the operation. And she had an issue with, like, the anaesthetist said, made some comment about not pulling through or something, and that really affected her when she had her cancer. So that was the trigger of, you know, not going to hospital. Not that she didn't want to go to hospital, but not going through that process. And she didn't want to die. She did not want to die in hospital.
Just a quick break from today's episode. If you've ever tried to get therapy, you know how frustrating it can be. You're finally ready to talk to someone, but you've been stuck on a waiting list for months. That's not how mental health support should work. Omnia Therapy makes getting help simple. You can book a session with a fully qualified professional in just 24 hours. No waiting, no contracts, just real support when you need it. And at £40 per session is actually affordable. If you're struggling, don't wait. Tap the link in the show notes or head to omniahealthgroup.com to book your session today. Do you find some comfort in the fact that she at least got her wish?
Oh, yeah. She got to spend an evening with my son. I went to bed and they stayed up. They like similar TV shows that I don't necessarily like to watch. So I was like, oh, I'll leave you two to it, and went to bed, and she got to spend time with him. And then he said he left in the morning, and that was it. So she got, like, you know, to spend time with him. And then and we watched the movie. The movie we watched was If with Ryan Reynolds, where he
Oh,
plays.
yeah.
So that was the last movie that like we all watched together, and it was a really good movie.
Mm.
So, yeah. So there's an element, there's a relief within the whole could have, would have, should have. Of I think that she passed in her sleep, she passed at home, and she got to spend time with her family. To see the positive element of that, I think, helps me a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, my sisters have kind of agreed with that, and they've been incredibly supportive. And obviously, I've been very lucky to have counselling offered to me by my work, which has been very, very helpful as well.
Obviously, you don't have to go into the details, but how have you found the therapy helpful?
I found the therapy helpful because I didn't think I'd need it, and I feel that I did actually need it, because there's certain things that happen during the day, like recently, like Mother's Day came up, and it was like how sorting out plans to deal with that, knowing it was coming up, and like spending the day with my sister, spending the day with family, so almost preempting moments that you're going to wobble. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's helped. Making plans for the future of things that I enjoy, that you know that I can gives me something to look forward to, and not sat at home and you know moping in missing mum, guilt or whatever. Not that I'm saying I've got a lot of guilt at the moment, but it is like, you know, there's still moments of like, oh, something happened at work, I need to tell, you know, it's like dealing with them moments. And I think with the counselling, it's helped me like refocus myself on like things that I enjoy. And it's silly, it's going to sound really silly. Mum had like the Sky, promotion, the satellite TV that you can record, and she like record all her shows and stuff. And I felt guilty deleting her shows. It sounds crazy, but obviously like talking to the therapist and saying, I feel guilty deleting her shows off the Skybox. And it's like, having that discussion helps, because it's like, you know, it's your house, it's your TV. Not saying it was like, oh, it wasn't my TV, it wasn't my house or whatever, but it was like, that was mum's thing of like, oh, have you recorded this? And I'll be like, yeah. Have you watched it yet? Yeah. Oh, I'll delete it. You know, it was that I think it was more of her understanding technology and thinking she was going to run out of space on the thing, and it was like there's like loads of space on there, you can have like loads, and it was more of like she micromanaged the Skybox, and me feeling guilty that I'm deleting her shows. And in the early weeks, and I hate to laugh about it, but the early weeks I ended up watching them, because it was like I'm watching
with her. In a way, having that conversation through counselling, you've probably saved yourself a lot of time distressing about that action of, because otherwise each time a new recording would come up, you would probably get those feelings again, right?
It's like,
so now it's almost like you've addressed it and you've dealt with it. As much as it was a difficult task to do, it saved you from repeating that distress.
And it sounds silly, but obviously like with the counselling, it was like I ended up deleting the series link so they wouldn't record anymore. But it was like, I know it sounds really silly, but it was silly things like that it's helped me deal with it. But like I said, you know, Mother's Day coming up, and I was really worried about it coming up, and it went fine. It went fine because I was ready for it. And you know, I have set goals this year. I'm doing a big party event for a fan group thing that I do in September, and it's given me something to focus on, and I have a lot more energy for me, whereas I hate to even say it, but obviously I was caring for mum, not that she needed caring or anything like that, but part of myself was like making sure mum was all right. And now it's like there's that free, even with I'm my own Skybox, there's that free space now that gives me that energy now to focus on other things that that I can do, and it's helped me a lot. Like when we planned her wake, we did it at a pub that she used to work at when she was like 18 years old, and we had like 40 odd people turning up. And obviously, like with my background, I'd done a graphic design, I don't know if you saw it, of a plaque with her picture, and she loved peacocks, and I put peacocks in it, and it was my way of being creative, but also giving like mum, I think it's too much of an American phrase, her flowers, but giving mum, something that she would like, and I've got that plaque in the house, and it sounds crazy, but I kind of talk to it as well, and the counselling again's helped with that, if I do something, oh thanks mum, or something happens, or I've forgotten something, I'll be like, oh sorry mum, or whatever. I kind of talk to this plaque that I've created, and I plan to put it upstairs in the hallway. But yeah, there's I think with bereavement, there's a lot of, I wish we had more conversations about what would happen when my mum passed away. I think people tiptoe around it, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast episode, because I don't think people, you don't learn it at school of like, oh, this is what happens when someone dies. You don't have I think people tiptoe around these conversations that, you don't want to admit to the fact that your parent's going to die, and also, yourself, you someday you're going to pass away.
Just a quick break from today's episode. Have you ever felt like the kind of support you need just doesn't exist? Maybe you need help outside of normal hours. Maybe you don't even know where to start. That's why Omnia Neurodiscovery exists. We offer specialised, flexible mental health support, including intensive evening and weekend packages for people who need something different. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, don't wait. Tap the link in the show notes or visit omniahealthgroup.com to find out how we can help. I think you've just pointed it out. You'd said we all know one day it's going to happen, right? But we never really think about it or talk about it openly enough.
Yeah, openly, because you think, it's not to sound morbid, but you kind of like, it's like, like my mum would joke saying, oh, what, you think I'm going to part,
you're trying to kill me off
you're trying to kill me off kind of thing. It's like, oh, what are you after? Not that it's like that. It was like that with my mum, and I had to, like, over the years, like, store bits of information of like, oh, right, she wants this, she wants that. And because we didn't have these conversations, and I'm not saying she wouldn't have had these conversations, we kind of did when we first moved into the house, and that was like 2019. She was sorting it all out, and she went with a company online, or one of them ones that advertise on TV that sort your will out. And she said she sorted it all out, and I trusted her that she'd sorted it out. And then about a year later, they went bankrupt or something. And we never had that discussion after that. So it was like kind of tiptoeing around it, especially when she had cancer as well, and she'd just beaten bowel cancer. And obviously around that time, and I think this is quite important, around that time, you want to remain positive. Oh, you'll be all right. You'll survive the operation. You'll be fine. So you're not going to have the negative discussions of like, oh, if you die, what's going to happen? What's the plan? Where do you want to be buried? So I had to remember all the conversations that we kind of tiptoed around of like, oh, she wants this, she wants that. But ironically as well, obviously, again, one of the things I had to do was phone her friends and stuff. And I phoned her best friend, and I said, oh, I'm thinking of doing this, this and this. And she said, oh, she wants this. And I was like, I did not know that. And then she was like, oh no, she wanted this. She said something about the headstone or something like that. And I was like, oh, I never knew that. And obviously she'd had that conversation with her best friend, but she hadn't had the conversation with me. So yeah, it was more the fact of, having them conversations and being prepared, a will, let your children know what you want. Sometimes the littlest things, where certain things in the house, who that goes to, and You know, where do you want to be buried, and do you want to be cremated? And you know, it was a lot of stuff that, and obviously, like talking to people, I kind of had to remember and piece it together because we didn't have them conversations, you know. And obviously, when she had the chest infection, it was like, oh, and coming up for her 70th birthday, it was like, oh, is there everything in place? And you know, and you can't, because you don't want to face the fact that someone's going to pass away.
And I suppose for you at that time, you're going through your own difficulty in terms of what you're experiencing. It's difficult, and then you've got the pressure of trying to piece all these bits of information together, and then you think you've got it, and then you have a conversation with a friend who says, "Oh no, but she wanted this as well," and then that must be even more pressure, because you think, "Well, hold on, I think I finally got it." Then someone throws a spanner in the works, but while you're trying to navigate your own grief at the same time, it must
and
be
then
so difficult.
you kind of then start going on the, oh, I think she would have wanted this, and then you kind of feel guilty, because it's like, is that right? Is that wrong? And even now, it's like, oh, what do I do with this? What do I do with that? Because I've not had them conversations, and now being a parent with a son, and I've only got one child, I feel very worried about him dealing with my death on his own, whereas I've got two sisters and siblings, and we've kind of come together to process this, and now I'm like, I need to sort my stuff out to make sure that he's ready to know what I want and what to do with, like, the house and my items, and where do I want to be buried, and some, I think, I don't know, I at the moment I'm not sure what I want. So, you know, at some point I've got to make that decision on, do I want to be buried? Do I want to be cremated? But once I make that decision, I need to let my son know. And that's part of the worry, that he's on his own and he's going to have to deal with that. But, you know, back to the counselling, you know, it's dealing with that, and dealing, you know, and almost future-proofing myself of, like, not feeling guilty for not having them conversations, but using, like, obviously this podcast now to say to people, don't be scared to have these conversations, because it's incredibly important. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with certain things that, and don't get me wrong, my mum was not disorganised. It's just, I think people tiptoe around the conversations, and I think it's important, you know, not to sound morbid, Mum, not to sound morbid, Dad, but can we just talk about, and I'm not after it, but can we just talk about what happens when you pass away?
Yeah. Because I remember one of the first conversations I had with you after your mum passed was the admin.
Yeah, the admin,
as well.
yeah.
Like, in terms of people, I think people don't realise the amount of admin that's involved. Now, when your head's not straight because you've just experienced a loss and you're you're distressed and you're upset, you've got no choice but to deal with the admin, because it needs to be done. And then on top of that, if there's no requirements or people's wishes haven't been left behind, then you're juggling all these balls up in the air on top of the admin,
which makes it so much more difficult.
on top of the pain. So it is a bit like, it sounds like a massive shock to the system.
I'm glad you brought up the admin part, because so I didn't even know that banks have bereavement lines, and I was like, so, because obviously my mum's passed away, and I'm like, I was worried that her pension was going to go in and transactions were going to be taken out. So I looked at her bank, and there was a bereavement line, and there was a bereavement service. I phoned them up. They were very, very helpful. They told me exactly what to do. I had to fill in these forms. There's, like you said, there's so many forms you have to fill in. So I filled in all these forms, thought it was all done, sent it to them, phoned them up saying I'd sent them to it. It's basically like proof of estate, what was in her account, does she have any assets to her estate and everything. And obviously, like I said, no one tells you any of this. Thought I'd had it all sorted, was waiting for the funds to be then transferred into another bank account, because basically they froze their bank account, so no transactions were being taken. And then obviously seeing what the transactions were that were being taken, phoned them up, and they were like, oh no, something doesn't match up, and it was something really trivial, and I'm like, So I had to do the
Really?
whole process again. And yeah, so the whole admin part, I think there's a lot of leaflets, and you see all the leaflets about bereavement, and I'm sure there's a lot of helplines out there, but it's the last, doing all the admin is the last thing.
You want to
You
be
don't
doing.
have the opportunity to grieve a parent's loss. I didn't have the opportunity because you're so focused of like, oh, this money's not going to be there, and we need to fund, and this is another thing. It's the cost of the funerals, and obviously you see all these TV adverts of like funeral costs are this, this, and this, and it's like, yeah, they are incredibly expensive, and obviously finding that amount of money, we were very lucky that my sister had some money. I was given some money by a friend that helped me out that I'm paying back. Not saying that Mum didn't put aside money, but obviously, like I said, she'd kind of sorted it out, thinking she'd sorted it out, and this company went bankrupt. So, so there was a lot of things that we had to sort out.
Just a quick break from today's episode. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: mental health at work. If you run a business, you've probably seen it: stress, burnout, employees who aren't performing at their best because they're struggling. The problem? Most companies don't know how to address mental health in a way that actually helps their team. That's where Omnia Corporate Training comes in. We provide CPD certified mental health training that's practical, flexible, and designed to fit into any workplace. If you want to invest in your team's well-being, and let's be real, happy employees perform better, tap the link in the show notes or visit omniahealthgroup.com to learn more. Because that's another thing. A lot of these, not a lot of them, some of these companies can trick people as well, in terms of they think they've covered it when they haven't covered it. So again, people sort of need to be aware of making sure if they're going to go down that route of investigating these companies and making sure they are solid, because people do think they've sorted it when they haven't.
Yeah, and I think, and no offense to my mum, sorry mum, that she thought it was all set up because, like, we just moved into a brand new house. She wanted to make sure that, and the thing was, it wasn't her, it was never her fault of, like, she thought she'd sorted it all out, and it was about, and we'd literally said, just before she passed her, oh, we'll sort it out next year, and she said, I'll sit down with you and we'll go through it all, and obviously that didn't happen, and so again, don't put off these conversations because you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, the admin part is the death certificate, banks, estate, things that she owed credit for, and then phoning all these people saying that she's. So the amount of conversations you had, oh, my mum's passed away, and
even the pension, right? You mentioned earlier about, oh, you were worried about the pension going in. You would think that there would be some sort of automated system, right, whereby if someone passes, that stops, so you don't have to go through that rigmarole.
Well, no. To be fair, there is a service. I think it's got some crazy name, and you'd have to put it in the details of the podcast. But it's like a government all-in-one, and you basically. So that did help. That did help. Of like the pension did stop, but it was more of literally. I'm sure that I was like sure that Mum's money was going in at that time. Because I didn't want Mum passing, a pension going in, and then me owing the pension or the estate owing the pension back to Mum. But there is this online thing. I think it's all in one form, and you literally say this person has passed away, and then it tells the council, and you tick it, and that was incredibly helpful. That it notifies everyone, and that was very, very helpful. And don't get me wrong, the bank bereavement line was incredibly helpful. It was real people on a real phone. It wasn't automated, and they were very, very helpful. It was just the process of redoing the form. I think I had to do it 3 times, of making sure it was straight, that her bank account was closed. But then she also had credit on other accounts that I then had to phone up and say, and they basically say, is there any money in the estate? If there is money in the estate, you pay off this credit. So yeah, it's a lot of that to sort out. And like I said, my sisters were incredibly helpful, and they helped take on some of it for all 3 of us. we had a lot more going on in our lives. Like my uh, middle sister, her daughter, my niece, oldest niece, was having a baby, and we planned to have the wake, and it turned out she was going to be induced on the day of the wake. So we
Oh.
had to then move the date of the wake. So we all had our own things going on in our lives, and yeah, to still go through all that, and again, it's no fault of my mum's, it's no fault of me or my sisters, but we just put things off, and I think a lot of people do this, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion with you. I even said, oh, you know, there needs to be a bit more out there that to help people that go through this, and like I said, you know, as hard as it is, have these talks, have these discussions, because it will really help you when it does actually happen. So, yeah.
So Lee, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm sure the viewers will find all of that information really helpful. If you are struggling with a bereavement and you feel that you need some support, we are here for you at Omnia Health Group, and there will be some additional support posted in the description. So please reach out.